This is the process we're going to go through to colorize an image. Starting from Lightroom, we're going to go ahead and click on the Develop tab. And at this point, we can make our basic adjustments here. So, profile embedded. Let's see, what do we want to do? I'm going to go ahead and click on Auto just to see where it goes. And the idea here is to get as much detail as we can in the shadows and in the highlights. Click on black and white to convert it to black and white, because eventually you want to convert the image to black and white so that we can actually add color back into it. That's the whole part of the process here. So anyway, let's see. We're going to go ahead and convert to black and white. My goal right now is to make it the richest black and white I can. So to kind of give it a little bit more contrast, to create more separation between the sky and this shadowed side here. So let's see, how can I do that? So I'm going to maybe lower the shadow information here. And I tend to like to push the sliders a little bit more than they might need, just so I can see where it's going to go, and I can always back it off. Here, let's open up the highlights just to see. And maybe a little clarity. Again, push it a little bit too far, and then see where that goes. Not bad, not bad at all. Dehaze, ooh, that kind of works on the blues, from the sky. You maybe get a little haze in there, so I'm going to go ahead and push that a little bit more. Now remember, we're doing basic adjustments here. I can go back down to my black and white settings and push and pull the colors depending on where they fall on the image. So here, if I push that, the sky, which was blue, gets really, really dark, and then we kind of get this yellow, orangey area. So I'm going to undo that because that kind of pushed it a little too far. Let's see, how about in the blue? Now we don't want to create too much of that because we want to add color back into it, but we want to have, some separation. So maybe a little tiny bit. Again, yellows, let's push these to the extreme, kind of see where they fall. Again, the goal is to retain as much detail and texture and separation as we can from the different areas. Red, doesn't seem to be much red in the image. Orange, there probably is. So again, this kind of flattens things out, but if we kind of push it this way a little bit, we kind of create a little bit more contrast, more separation. And so the colors actually look pretty good. I'm going to actually go back up to my basic adjustment and open up the shadows just a little bit more, because pushing it just kind of made it a little bit too much, and then maybe overall exposure just a bit. All right, so that looks like it's not too bad. Not too bad if I do say so myself. So anyway, we have shadow detail here. We have highlight detail here. And taking a look at my histogram, it kind of runs the whole dynamic range, from blacks to white. There might be a little bit of clipping. You can see it right here in the blue area. And so that's the clipping warning up here, highlight warning there, and a little bit of clipping, not too bad. If I needed to and I wanted to keep that texture or that detail, I'm going to back off on the black values until it goes away. Such small little areas, it's not critical, but it never can, never hurt. Okay, so now we have a color image that we converted to grayscale. Now we need to take it into Photoshop and apply those steps of colorizing to this image. So under the photo menu, I'm going to go to Edit in Photoshop and edit with a copy of Lightroom adjustments. Yes, because if I do either one of these, you will not see the black and white. It'll just basically edit the original raw file unretouched or untouched at all. So we let it do its magic. Switch over to Photoshop. Bam, look at that. Looks pretty good. So what I want to do, collapse some of this stuff, is go in and figure out obviously what I want to do with this image. What do I want to color and what kind of colors. Now I picked this image because it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty linear. You know, there's not a lot of irregular shapes, and there's a couple approaches that we can take with this. One is to just free paint it, which means we grab the paintbrush and fill it with some color. The other one is to use maybe a selection and then use that as the starting point for our color. So let me go back to this mode here. And one of the key things, and I saw this in class, is notice up here it says RGB. That means it's a color image, even though there is no color in it yet. It's a color image. It has to be RGB for you actually to see color in the image. If for some reason it shows up and it says gray or grayscale, you need to go under the image menu and go to mode and change it from grayscale to RGB. So if it says grayscale, under image mode, change it to RGB color. Then you'll be good to go. Cool, but we're good to go now. So let's give it a shot. So let's see. Part of the image I'm gonna go ahead and just paint, and the other part I'll go ahead and make a selection so we can actually see how that works. So first thing, and again, this was kind of a thing that we saw in class. Even though people were making layers, you need to make sure that you're on the layer before you add the color. And unfortunately, in a couple cases, I saw that there was a painting directly on the background, and we want to avoid that. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer here. And I'll give it a name, double click it, call it Ruins. And go to my foreground swatch here. And I'm going to pick a color that I think might be appropriate. Again, we can always shift the color, change the color, and whatnot. Grab my paintbrush, which is here. The shortcut is the letter B for brush. And again, remember, the brush has a certain size, opacity, flow, all that good stuff. When we're colorizing, typically I always leave the mode to normal, opacity 100%. Sometimes I'll change the flow, but mostly I'll keep it at 100%. And the hardness or the softness you access here. We want to change that based on whether it's a soft edge or hard edge. So in this case, it's mostly hard edges, so I'm going to have a hard brush, and you can always change that and increase the size. So that's a little bit kind of on the small side. I'm going to move my cursor up here. So the right bracket key, you can hear me clicking it. It makes the brush bigger. Left bracket makes it smaller. So it is a nice handy way to increase the brush size without having to go back under the menu here. And the bracket keys are next to the letter P, to the right of the P key on your keyboard. So here I'm just going to go ahead and start painting. Again, double checking I'm on my correct layer, and I'll paint. And I'll paint and I'll paint and I'll paint. So here I'm just going to paint. Now you can rough it out so you can actually see what you're covering up. And before you get too carried away, and I know it's easy to do, here I'm going to go ahead and change the blending mode, because that's going to give it that colorized hand-tinted effect. Change it from normal. Now you can play with any of these blending modes, but I'm going to choose color initially, and now it's got that tinted effect. I'm going to zoom in. Command spacebar or Control spacebar on the PC will zoom in. If you need to zoom back out, Option or Alt spacebar zooms back out. And remember, the spacebar alone will give you the hand tool so I can pan my image around. That way I don't have to change tools, I don't have to zoom in and out with other tools. I can stay using the same brush and paint my image. So this is kind of a big brush. I'm going to go ahead and reduce the size there. And here I'll just go ahead and paint over. Now, I'm going to say I'm painting in the sky area on purpose, but I'm doing it to illustrate a point. So I want you to go in and make sure you zoom in on your image so that you can actually remove some of the extra paint. Sometimes it's a little easier to add a little bit and then remove it than it is to try to get it the first time. So here I'm just going to block all that in. Not worried about that. Actually, if I zoomed in, it looks kind of like an armpit, doesn't it? I'll probably edit that out, but I'll probably forget, so apologies initially. Okay, so here we have this little corner. I'm going to click there. I'm going to show you a shortcut, and I'll show you somewhere else. So I'll undo this. If I click in one spot and I move my cursor, I let go of the mouse, I move my cursor somewhere else, if I hold down the Shift key and click again, it connects the dots. So if I click, hold down the Shift key, and click again, it'll connect the dots. Super handy when you're doing stuff like this. So if I click here, this is fairly straight, so I'm going to line it up, hold down the Shift key, and click. Bam. Click, Shift click, Shift click, and so on. So something along the straight edges like that, click, hold down the Shift key, click again, hold down the Shift key, click again. And so you can really kind of speed things up that way. That doesn't work if it's not straight, but you know, sometimes you can actually save a little bit of time. Click once, hold down the Shift key, click again, and boom. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and try to expedite this process by painting this in quickly. Oops, missed the spot. So definitely go in and, you know, try to fill as much in as you can. Now this one's a pretty straightforward scene, and the areas are pretty well defined. Here again, I can kind of make the brush smaller, space bar, command key to zoom in, click there, hold down the Shift key and line it up. Again, click here, hold down the Shift key and click again to connect those dots. So it kind of helps define the edge. All right, so here we're just free painting it, and I will show the other approach for the sky. Actually, yes, I'm going to do that because it's going to be a lot easier. Now, if it's completely irregular, if it's hair or something like that, it definitely makes it a little bit more challenging to hand paint it. I'm sorry, to make a selection. It makes it easier to hand paint it because it's kind of wispy and irregular. Here, I want to clean this up. So while I'm in this mode, I'm going to go ahead and choose my eraser tool. We have E for eraser. Again, wrong eraser here, eraser tool. And again, it works off a brush, and the brush can be either hard or soft. So I'm going to make it a hard brush to be consistent with my paintbrush. And here I'm going to go in and remove some of that excess paint. Notice how close I'm getting. I definitely want to make sure that I'm in tight, and my flow was set to low, so I want to bring that up. And again, just go in and clean that up. If you take too much off, you can actually go back in and paint it again. So here we go. Okay, cool. So paintbrush with the B key, grab some more of this stuff over here if you missed it. All right, I think that's probably good for the moment. We have other stuff we can attend to. We have this other section, but I'll show you how to fix that in a second. So here we have our blending mode, and yeah, there it goes. We have our blending mode, and it's set to color, but that might be too intense of a color. So then we dial it back with our opacity. Kind of get that really rustic, kind of almost sepia toned effect here. Now again, you can always change the blending mode, play around with it. Screen is going to do something different. Let me change that back to 100% so you can actually see the difference. So there's screen, multiply. Ooh, makes it super intense, very graphic looking. Overlay, you know, it all depends on whatever color is on this layer and whatever value is on the layer below it. That's what it will affect. So for what we're doing now, I think color would probably be the ticket, although kind of overlay looks pretty cool. And then lower the opacity here, give us a certain effect. Okay, so we've added one color, and because of the gray in the background, it almost looks like the sky is blue because we have a warmer color in front. That gray now starts to appear cool in contrast to it. So what we want to do is go in and now pick a color for the sky. I'm going to go ahead and pick a color, and you can see that there's really no preferred direction of this, meaning which steps come first. I can pick the color and then make a layer, or I can make a layer, then pick the color. That's up to you. So now I need to make a new layer, and I'm going to double click the name here and call it Sky. And so what I want to do on this one is I want to go in and select the sky. Now I'm going to use the other approach where we're actually going to use a selection tool. Pardon me. I'm going to use a selection tool and select these areas to make it a little bit faster and a little bit easier. Again, whatever approach works best for you or the image is the one you should choose. So for this area here, I'm going to use the quick selection tool. Because it is irregular and irregular enough where one of the other tools like the lasso tool might not be as applicable. So what I want to do here is grab this area. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn off the orange layer just so that there's no conflict. And all I see is this grayscale image. So with the quick selection tool here, I'm going to sample all layers, and I have auto enhance so it kind of picks up the edges even more closely, and I'm just going to click. And that did a pretty good job. It kind of overshot. Whoops. Yeah, overshot in a couple spots here. You can kind of see those little marching ants. So we can either undo that, step backwards, and maybe try that again. And again, it overshot it, so that's fine. I can use the subtract option, maybe a smaller brush, and subtract that area out. Take it in little steps here. Get a little bit closer. That's fine. For what it is, this is fine. I can always go back in and add or remove color from here. Again, on my sky layer, which is transparent, I'm going to now put the color in. Now you can paint it in with the paintbrush, like this, or make it even more quick, do Edit, Fill. I'm going to fill with the foreground color, which I chose as blue over here. Normal 100%. And because the whole layer initially is transparent, I want to not preserve transparency because otherwise it won't do anything. So foreground color, normal 100%. Click OK, and bam, fills it with that color. When I'm done, I can just deselect that selection and see what I've got. Now obviously that's too intense. I don't see the sky through it. Change the blending mode again to color, and you can see where it overshot, which is fine. And but now I can actually see through it. Here I can go jump to my eraser tool. If you're comfortable with using layer masks, I recommend doing that instead. But if you're not, no big deal. So again, I'm just going to go in here and clean this up. And once you start adding multiple layers of color, you want to go in and zoom in and check for any areas that overlap, or maybe you didn't get quite enough paint on one area or another. So here, those sound effects are optional. Pink, pink, pink. Cool. All right, that looks pretty good. And over here, wait, we have more. There's more. So here again, I want to use the quick selection tool. And go up here, quick selection tool, make a new selection, and grab it. All I did was a little brush stroke. So it kind of picks up to a certain point. Now I need to add to that selection, probably because I had such a small brush, it really jumped. And there we go. It kind of overshot a couple spots, but as we saw, it's fairly easy to get rid of that excess. So again, I'm going to go to Edit, Fill, and fill with the foreground color, normal 100%. Click OK. And I'm going to go ahead and deselect. Select. There it is. Deselect. All right, so here, let's go in and use our handy dandy eraser tool and get rid of that stuff. Whoops, wrong tool. Eraser, E for eraser. Sometimes they really make the names obvious, except when you get to the healing brush, and that's a J. Maybe for Johnson & Johnson because they make Band-Aids, I don't know. It's like product placement in there. Click on one spot, hold down the Shift key. Again, even with the eraser tool, you can click, do that click and connect the dots thing. Click, Shift, click, and remove those edges. Ooh, that's a big piece. All right, getting there. So a couple little spots there. We can come back and deal with that if it becomes a problem. Looking at all this other stuff, fine. I'm going to add a little bit more. So again, going back to my paintbrush and add that back in. Smaller brush using the bracket key, and that seems to be good. Cool. So now that's fairly good. Let's go ahead and turn on the ruins layer. And as we saw, we missed this one spot. And so here's what we're going to do. We're going to kind of combo our techniques here. We're going to go ahead and use the quick selection tool again. And I'm going to go ahead and pick this area. Okay. It kind of snaps right to that edge, which is perfect. And so remember though, I clicked on this area here, and that's the selected area. But I want to paint this edge without having to go in and redo anything. So again, we're comboing techniques. Initially, we just went in and did free painting on this. And then we made a selection here, and then we filled the selection with some paint. We repeated that process in this area, but now we left this untouched, and we're going to kind of combo those techniques. The combo technique of painting and selecting. So here I've made a selection on the sky. The sky is selected in this area. I want to paint out here. The way we do that is I select inverse, which reverses the selection. So now the sky is not selected, but everything around it is. You can kind of see that we have these little, they're called marching ants on the edges. That means that part up between these parts is selected. So what that allows me to do is paint in here along this edge. Super handy. Now the catch is I want to paint it with that kind of orange color for the sepia effect, but I have blue as my foreground color. Now if I use my eyedropper here and I sample, notice that looks nothing, that color looks nothing like my original color. If I want to match the original color exactly, the easiest way to do that is to go to the layer that has that color. And I probably forgot to mention earlier, each unique color should be on its own layer. And try to name the layers appropriately so that way at least you can go in and find them. But here, I know that I originally painted with 100% of that color. If I change my blending mode back to normal, and this is just temporary, normal and 100%, I now have that solid color again. It's okay that the marching ants or the selection is still active, it doesn't matter. I grab my eyedropper tool, click anywhere on that color. Now my foreground color is reset to that color. And here, since we can see this, I'm going to grab my paintbrush. And I could fill it if I want, but I'm going to go ahead and just paint it in because everything else is filled. Well, actually, no, I can't fill it because it'll fill this area as well. So what I want to do is use this selection and just take my paintbrush and paint along that edge. Notice how it stays in there. It didn't quite pick up there, but that's cool. and it didn't grab that part either. Okay, we're done with that. So I can just deselect, and if I need to, I can actually zoom in and see the areas it did not get, and it's a little easier right now to see these things. Now you could make another selection down here, but I'm just going to use my paintbrush and paint that in. You know, a little overlap of the blue is okay. And again, it's just all basically about what is easy for you to see. Now the reason why here the blue is showing through is because the blue is on top and it's colorizing the layer below it. Especially since the color right now is a solid. Click, hold down the shift key and click again. Actually, that's probably not right, meaning it's the blue probably doesn't go all the way to the edge, or it's not that straight. So, all right, boom, we're getting there, getting there. Are you feeling it? So here we go. Please don't hand something that looks like this in. It's not complete. Changing the blending mode back to color again, or one of the other ones, whatever you chose initially, and then you can leave it like this, or go in and lower the opacity to something a little bit more applicable to the look that you're going for. So here we have pretty well defined areas, and again, zoom in on your image and check things out. You know, if that looks kind of odd, you can always go back and grab the eraser or the paintbrush and, you know, fill it in. Let's go ahead and go back to that blue sky layer. Since I don't have the blue anymore, I have to go to normal. See how this works? Eyedropper and sample that blue color. Now switch back to color mode. And for this, you know, I'm going to treat this like I would if it was, you know, painting along somebody's hair. I'm going to get my paintbrush and I'm going to use a soft brush. And I'm going to go ahead and feather it in there so it looks like it blends a little bit more. And the flow just is kind of how intense the effect happens, or how quickly the effect happens. So if I lower the flow, it kind of slowly builds up. Kind of what I'm looking for on that one. Same with this. You know, I can go in there and feather that in. And that's it. So, you know, if that looks odd, which it kind of does, in my opinion, let's go ahead and grab the eraser tool and kind of repeat that process, except we're going to actually remove some of that color. So, you know, I don't expect you to get all those little strands. You can if you want, but I think all we need to do is try to make it look plausible. It's a little bit more plausible. Soft edge. There we go. So it's not, whoops, not as hard on the edges there. Cool. Now, if you wanted to take it to the next level, you could put varying colors on top of this. So, you know, you can add a new layer and put, you know, some accents. So if I wanted to go in here and, you know, play around with, I don't know, a different color, and you can go in maybe with your paintbrush, nice soft brush, and you want to put some, you know, I don't even know if this is going to work, color mode. You know, now that doesn't really work well, does it? Or some green. Maybe green would be better. But anyway, you can add some greenery to it. Show you, since I've already gone this rabbit hole. Go in here, soft brush, you know, maybe on this stuff here, and change the blending mode. Don't forget to change the blending mode and or the opacity. So that way you can kind of dial in the effect. It's not like completely in your face. Oh, look at that. It's starting to look good. Oh, maybe even these areas. There's a little green, little greenage here, a little greenery. Gives it, just livens it up. It gives it a different dimension when you start doing stuff like that, because it's not just one solid color that people are looking at. And again, if you have to, go in and tidy things up with the paintbrush, or I'm sorry, the eraser tool. Or again, if you're using layer masks, use the layer masks. And yeah, pretty good. Not bad, not bad. Cool. So that's basically the process, is to go in, greenery, starting with your background layer, which is black and white, go in and create subsequent color layers, and each color layer will have a unique color and a unique name. Remember that you need to paint on that particular layer, not on the background. So double check. Anytime you're starting to paint something, double check to make sure you're not on the background. And ideally, each color will have its own layer, because that way you can have unique blending modes and opacity changes for each color. If all the colors were on one layer, each color would get the same blending mode and the same opacity change. And as you can see here, this one's 24% opacity for the greenery. The sky looks better at 100%. This is 50% for the ruins. And sky, we can even set it to multiply. Ooh, no, can't set it to multiply. Overlay or something like that to really dial it in. So you can see it's not just color mode that you can deal with, it's anything else that works best for your image. Okay, hopefully this was helpful. And if you definitely have any questions, let me know. Ask me or Jay. And enjoy colorizing.